In 1958 Hong Kong, Bruce Lee was 18 years old. He was about to jump into a boxing ring with Gary Elms, the current school's champion. Bruce had only been given a few months of preparation to modify his Wing Chun Kung Fu for normal boxing. His first and final day of boxing was about to start. Bruce shifted into a classic Kung Fu stance, whilst his opponent took on the Western boxing stance. The visual clash of East versus West began. The bell rings. Now, Bruce Lee explodes, unleashing his lightning-fast strikes and impeccable footwork, moving like a blur around his opponent. Gary Elms, a skilled boxer, attempted to land powerful punches, but Bruce's evasive maneuvers just made him far too challenging a target. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, marveling at Bruce Lee's extraordinary agility and precision. He effortlessly adapted to each of Elms' moves, countering with swift, powerful attacks. It was a mesmerizing display of skill and strategy, leaving the spectators in awe of Bruce Lee's young prowess. He knocked Gary down several times, and when the final whistle blew, it was clearly a win. However, after the victory, Bruce Lee did not boast about his achievement. In fact, he felt very aware of his lack of strength and was frustrated that he didn't have the power to knock Gary Elms out. Lee swears that he'll redouble his training and humbly acknowledges just the valuable learning experience rather than boasting about his skills. He recognized that there were many areas where he could still improve and refine his techniques. This match really helped to reinforce Bruce Lee's belief in just constantly evolving and expanding his martial arts knowledge. His response really demonstrated his unwavering dedication to self-improvement and his commitment to embracing challenges as opportunities for growth. Now, that mentality would carry him forward to create his success in martial arts, of course, but filmmaking, writing, and philosophy, for which he also became rather famous. And if you want to know what happened after this fight, he actually got caught up with more street fights in Hong Kong where he lived, so his father moved him to the US, where he then got into acting. And at this point in time, 1960, there'd never been an Asian hero in cinema. Yet ultimately, Bruce Lee showed the world that anyone could succeed with determination and discipline. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, Sam Webster Harris. Today, we will be looking at Bruce Lee's life and his 6 habits and mindsets for success. Number 1, embrace failure on the path to success. Now, Bruce Lee said, "Do not fear failure, for it is not failure but low aim that is the crime. In great attempts, it is glorious even to fail." Now, Bruce Lee is of course famous for his ambition and his fearlessness, but you might believe that that comes from his confidence that he would always win. And yet he really knew within his core that failure was fine as long as he would learn from it and get up again from any failure and try again, because that makes you unstoppable. Now, of course, he's famous for his attitude for perfection, which is often seen to conflict with the fear of failure, but he believed in continuous improvement and self-mastery. He believed in striving for excellence in all aspects of life, including martial arts, philosophy, and personal growth. He also really emphasized that perfection itself is a very elusive concept and that the journey towards it is much more important than achieving an unattainable ideal. He did famously say that, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And this quote reflects his focus on mastering the fundamentals first and honing one's skills through dedicated practice and repetition. However, when it came to failure, Bruce Lee had a unique perspective. He encouraged embracing failure as just a natural part of the learning process. Instead of avoiding failure, he believed in learning from it and using it as a stepping stone to success. He saw failure as an opportunity to gain valuable insights, to adjust one's approach and grow stronger. And I think his attitudes towards perfection and embracing failure as part of it really just showed his real root beliefs in continuous learning, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace challenges as opportunity for growth. The ultimate growth mindset. Number 2, carry a notebook everywhere. Well, you may not know it, but Richard Branson is also famous for carrying a notebook everywhere, and Lee carried his notebook wherever he went. He'd write everyday musings, philosophy, affirmations, poetry, funny lines, ideas, and he'd later combine the thoughts that he had as he was going along into his visions for success. When he found or came up with a significant idea, he'd use the back of a plain 3x5 yellow note card to write it down and then sign the note card as a contract to himself. So he'd often be refining and copying the notes from his notebooks into these note cards. And according to the University of Rochester Medical Center and several other research institutes, journaling does have the benefits of managing anxiety, reducing stress, coping with depression, but also helping you prioritize your goals and your problems. So in other words, get yourself a journal and make notes and reflect on them and pull out the most important bits. And number 3, repeat goals to yourself, which relates to his signing his cards, so he'd have an awareness of what he really should be doing. He really did begin to write down his goals and recite them over and over again. Now, this is a pretty timeless classic from things such as Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, but has also been shown in science as well. And on January the 7th, 1969, Lee wrote down a life goal entitled, My Definite Chief Aim. And this goal stated that I, Bruce Lee, will be the first highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. I will give the most exciting performances and render the best of quality in the capacity of an actor. Starting 1970, I will achieve world fame, and from the onward till the end of 1980, I will have in my possession $10 million. I will live the way I please and achieve inner harmony and happiness. Now, kind of uncannily, most of his goals would ring true. With the release of the film Enter the Dragon in 1973, Lee did become one of the world's most recognizable film stars. And again, there is some science behind this. It's not just saying some things and they will happen. Researchers from the University of Waterloo, Colin MacLeod and Noah Foran, have proven that reading words aloud does make them easier to remember than reading them silently. Doing so can produce a memorable experience called the production effect. This effect is the active cognitive process of encoding words into long-term memory, and it works better when your own voice is used to produce the words. Another boxer, Mike Tyson, also used a similar visualization technique with his trainers to visualize himself one day becoming the boxing champion, and he did become the heavyweight champion of the world at age 20. Arnold Schwarzenegger also used visualization in believing that he could become Mr. Olympia and then getting into acting, which was a similar stigma against him as like strong men couldn't really be proper actors, but he managed to really forge that path. And then getting into politics, where again, people at the time believed that sort of a dumb actor could become a proper politician, and he became governor of California, which is GDP-wise the 10th biggest country in the world. Anyway, let's get back to Bruce Lee and journaling. So basically, reading your goals aloud to yourself can in some ways help them come true. Now, one of my bugbears with this podcast is a lot of people do think that growth mindset might be related to sort of like, oh, just believe stuff and it can happen. Like, growth mindset doesn't mean that you can do anything with your life. Now, growth mindset doesn't break the laws of physics. You can't do absolutely anything. You can do any physically possible thing, but you also can't do everything, and you have to work out what you need to sacrifice to get there and be responsible for making those sacrifices and being the person in control. You can't just believe that good things will happen. And they'll happen. You have to also believe that will happen due to the sacrifices and work that you put into it. A fundamental part of growth mindset is work, which takes us on to number 4. Practice your craft constantly. Now, there's a great quote from one of Bruce Lee's students called Ted Wong, who says, "Do not expect Bruce Lee-like results unless you're willing to put in Bruce Lee-like hours to obtain them." Bruce Lee would constantly tell his students that Bruce himself was not actually that special. Instead, he was just a very dedicated trainer. In 1963, the records show that Bruce Lee would be practicing at least 3 hours a day on just the wooden dummies, as well as all the other training that goes into it. In fact, Chuck Norris even stated that no other human being had trained the way Bruce Lee trained, fanatically. He lived and breathed it from the time he got up at 6 o'clock in the morning until he went to bed at night. According to the book Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin, deliberate practice is worth more than anything. Now, sure, some people do, of course, have natural gifts and can improve faster, but it is practice that really delivers the results. High performers like Mozart, Tiger Woods, or the Williams sisters weren't born like geniuses. In fact, they just practiced daily from a young age. Mozart received classical music training from his father, who was a composer. Tiger Woods' father devoted his life to turning him into the best golf player in the world. The same with the Williams sisters, whose father just dedicated himself to training them to be the best they could be. And it was practice that unlocked that, not just innate skill. So like Bruce Lee, whatever your passion is, you have to devote yourself to it to make it happen. Number 5, constantly read a variety of subjects. Although reading is becoming less popular, it has many physical and mental benefits. Like many of the great thinkers, Bruce Lee obtained an education through his own style of self-learning. He was always carrying a book with him anywhere he went. In his free time, he'd often visit bookstores. And by the time he died, when he was 32, he had over 2,500 books in his personal library. And that's not just martial art books, but Western and Eastern philosophy, exercising books, self-help books, Shakespeare, other novels. And the point is that reading widely broadens your knowledge and gives you ideas that you can't have alone and gives you more access to your own creativity. According to the psychologist Robert Epstein, having more diverse knowledge allows for more interconnections. And that's the basis of creative thinking. And that certainly rang true for Bruce Lee with his reading. It really allowed him to widen his own fighting methods, and combining 3 different martial art theories of boxing, fencing, and the Wing Chun Kung Fu, as well as widening his own philosophical thinking, incorporating thinkers such as the Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti and other Eastern philosophy. And this really helped Lee develop the Jeet Kune Do, which was his non-fixed way of thinking in regards to martial arts and philosophy. So if that inspires you at all, go read something out of your comfort zone. If you're looking for some inspiration, I have a podcast all about books called the Wiser Than Yesterday Book Club podcast, where we read lots of different subjects and might give you some ideas of books that are worth reading or not. And anyway, moving on to number 6, researching widely and adapting using old or new methods. Do not hang on to things just because you've done them the same way you've always done them. And yet do not throw things out just because of the new fad has come along. The point is to just try and adapt things and just seek improvement. Throughout Lee's life, he constantly used new ways to improve his martial arts or fitness abilities. From the mid-1960s to the early 1970s, Lee would read magazines on bodybuilding, cutting each article out that he liked and saving them. He may well have been the first martial artist to train like a modern athlete. Because of his research, he actually incorporated the then not used technique that much of interval training and weightlifting and nutritional eating with electric juicing. He also ran and stretched daily, which might be shocking to read, was uncommon for martial artists at the time. I mean, I do all of these things and I'm not even trying to do martial arts. Yeah, anyway, the point is he was really ahead of his time because he was always keen to learn what he could do to improve himself. He'd studied and incorporated isometric training, which led him to be able to strengthen his muscles without putting on too much mass. And he genuinely created new exercising systems for himself using new and old school exercises. In the martial arts, Lee began to add Western boxing and fencing tactics, sparring, broken rhythms, etc. into his Wing Chun Kung Fu training. Whilst at the same time, he still kept many of the Wing Chun Kung Fu tactics, the sticky hand training as it's known, low kicking, short punches, etc. In other words, he really successfully combined the East's structure and form along with the West's function and practicality in martial arts. Pablo Picasso combined the European and African influences to really start the art of the Cubism movement. If you look at Van Gogh, in the Impressionism, he also sometimes combined the Japanese influences of a flatter painting where there is no shadows and different uses of light. So like Lee, we should really find and research old and new methods alike to combine them to create our own original thoughts and works. So in conclusion, despite the fact that he died over 50 years ago, Bruce Lee's influences still happen to this day, not only in cinema, but he's also known as the founding father of MMA. And he is just a character that really speaks to both Eastern and Western cultures, who shows the power of relentless perseverance, determination, creativity, and of course, the growth mindset. So I hope this really inspired you to look into some of your own habits and see the kind of things that you can achieve with the right determination and approaches. And thank you so much for listening. If you're on YouTube or Spotify, you can add any of your thoughts in the comments. You can, of course, give us a like and a rating on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple, and that would be amazing. Everyone says this, so you could just ignore this because of you might have better things to do with your life. But what is important to do with your life is to enjoy it. And that starts today. It's not something to be put off until the future. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause, silence, to reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.